Hi, my name is Susan Doyle from Box Media, and I will be the moderator today. I would like to welcome you to Lean Construction Ireland's 14th webinar, the topic of which is Whiteboard Meetings, Daily Huddles aspect of the last planner system, presented by Simon Tritschler from BAM Ireland. If you have a question, please type it in the question box and we will consolidate and ask Simon in the second half of the webinar. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. The agenda will be as follows: opening introduction by Ellie Barker, presentation by Simon, followed by questions and answers. I will now hand you over to Ellie.
Hi guys, my name is Ellie Parker and I'm your representative from the LCI Leadership Group here today. So this webinar is being brought to you by Lean Construction Ireland in conjunction with our media and communications partner Box Media. As Susan said, today's webinar title is Whiteboard Meetings and the Daily Huddles aspect of the last planner system. I'm really looking forward to hearing about this. The speaker for today is Simon Tritschler, who has tons of experience in this area and bringing out last planner system on different projects. Simon is a professional surveyor with over 25 years experience within survey management, consultancy, training and technical support roles. His current role with BAM Ireland is within the Virtual Design and Construction Department as a BIM deployment specialist. Simon provides training and support across all of BAM Ireland's project on their CSMS, their construction site management system. Previously, Simon has also worked in the development of high-performance teams for the delivery of multi-million-dollar projects, developing industry-leading procedures and practices in measurement technologies for global microelectronics and pharmaceutical clients. As a former treasurer of the Irish Institute of Surveyors, Simon has also worked with the private and public sectors, covering all aspects of the survey industry, from mining, metrology, industrial, civil, topographical and aerial surveying, using the most modern techniques and equipments. So I'm now going to turn you over to Simon and he is going to tell us all about these aspects of the last planner system. So thank you, Simon. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Just check, Ellie, that you can hear me there.
Yeah, all good.
Okay. Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this seminar. This little chat today is going to be about the current project that we have at the moment out in Dublin. We're building a small little healthcare centre there. And it's part of our journey here to cover on where we are and what we've done so far. So if I start off with just a brief overview of the presentation that we have. BAM is a rather large but traditional construction company, and we're very much project driven. So as we've developed throughout the years, like many construction companies, we've been driven on a project by project basis and on the needs of each of those projects. And this has got us to where we are today. We're doing a lot of work around the country, a lot of PPP work and so on. So at the moment, we're on a very large digital journey, and that's a little bit of what I'm going to cover today. And we are developing a more process orientated direction for our business. And part of that process orientation is going to be the lean and the last planning system. We will in the future be a much larger digital construction company and have a much more process focused approach. So rather than the traditional project view where we have an individual driving a project, usually on personality or on program, we're going to have a much more process driven or an industrialized construction process that will enable us to deliver projects more evenly across the group. So I'll just move on slowly. So we are BAM. Now the name of BAM is a large Dutch company. We've been around for over 200 years. And I won't even start to try and pronounce how you say that in Dutch. So BAM is a large company. We have operations here in Ireland. We took over from Ascon. We have operations in the UK where we took over Nuttall's. And we have operations across the Netherlands, Germany and Belgium, as well as BAM International, which operates globally around the world. At the moment, we are, when we include the current hospital, the largest contractor in Ireland on this sort of project. And we're currently closing out around 7 PPP projects on the courts, and we finished off school bundles for another PPP project. As well as that, we're working on quite a few civils jobs around the country, including the N25, which has the largest concrete deck span bridge in Europe at the moment. So we're busy at the moment. We're very, very busy. So where we are, or where we were, as with all technical construction companies, we were based very much on notes. Now, this is a very extreme example of the back of an envelope type thing, but this was very much, this signified and quantified a lot of what was done in the construction industry and continues to be done in the construction industry. The industry itself ranks very poorly when it comes to process. It ranks very poorly when we look at the efficiencies that are in the business, and I think it's up there with fishing. And this approach here, which traditionally has taken us to where we are, is starting to fall down when we look at what we need to provide and deliver to our clients and our customer base. So this is a graph that we have developed within BAM. It's actually an active graph, but I've just taken the final screenshot from it. And what this screenshot shows in a very, very simple way is the life cycle of a tender or the life cycle of a building. And if we follow along here at the top, we have the facility, the feasibility study, the tender, the bidder, the construct, and so on, the whole life cycle, the whole REBA stages of construction, where a client would decide that they want a building, they put it out for tender, they pick a bidder, they have very little involvement in the construction, very little involvement in the handover, and then they try and operate it. From a building point of view, BAM come along as a contractor. They're not involved in the feasibility study. They sort of involved in the tender. They get chosen. They're heavily involved in construction phase. And then at handover, they pass over the information and they're getting less and less involved. And then the FM provider, if there is one, has no involvement all the way up to handover. And then throughout handover and operation, the project goes on. Now, this little graph here, while it's compressed, shows a huge amount of information. And what it's used to signify is the difficulty that the construction process has with the current process. So while the owner and the client are heavily involved during the tender stage and looking for what they want and what they want to achieve, their involvement at construction is very, very limited. Then they're given a whole box load of information. And then for the operation stage, which makes up 75% of their costs, they have nothing but problems. They have interaction with the handover, information is lost, and so on. So there was a major disconnect happening between the whole life cycle of building, from the start of the feasibility through tender all the way through for the client. And this was a problem that we've recognized, and for BAM, it's something that we want to address very, very closely. So we are currently where we are is we're moving towards this process. And here we have a much more integrated process with the client, with the FM provider. We have much more communication. And this is the basis of our BIM, our business information modeling system. So this is where we have much more involvement at the early stage of the work. We understand what has to be delivered. We understand what the client wants. We understand the schedule. We understand the deadlines. We understand everything that we need to build the building more efficiently as a construction company. What we also understand is the importance of the schedule, and we bring to the table our understanding of the constructability of that project. So whether this is a PPP project or a traditional contract, we're able to go back in, isolate the information, discuss with the tender, discuss with the client, discuss with the architect, discuss with the design team how things can be improved early on in the stage, develop our BIM, develop our BEP, our building execution plan, and all the information that's going to go through it, and smooth out the whole transfer of information the whole way through the process. And this has been reflected in our current process and our current BIM application. About 2 years ago, we were able to transfer the PPP schools all the way through from design to FM handover as one of the firsts under the NDFA and at the BIM level 2 contracts. So this process for us is working for construction, it's working for us for design. And what we want to do now is move this system so it goes beyond these and into the whole process of governing BAM as a company. So over the last few years, BAM has moved from a traditional company, and we've started by 2020, we are on a path for the whole digitization of our process. So if we look at a little house here, which BAM is very used to looking at little houses, this is based on the lean model, and BAM has built different pillars all based around the BIM process to ensure that BAM become a digital compliant company. And we take away all the gains that can be taken from the digitization process and make our company a much leaner and much more efficient company. In here, where the pillars are our process, the data, and the tech systems that we use. Now, while we're working at all these things, each one of these little headings up here all have their own little workflows, all have their own little systems. So, for example, within QA/QC for field BIM, we have a very, very tight system where we can manage the asset from design stage all the way through to commissioning on the construction process. We have, for asset management, we can take in information, we can take something from the model, be it a pump or a fan coil unit or anything like that, add all the asset information to it, when it was commissioned, when it was installed, take photographs of it, and so on. And that process is nailed down. Currently, where we are, we're moving towards more project controls for 5D, more project controls for planning, project controls itself, and better visualization. So as part of our 2020 plan, these are the headings under which we're concentrating at the moment in much greater detail. The red ones, the red boxes down below, are everything that's happening in the background to support this new system. So this is the enablement of new processes, this is the purchase of new software, this is training, this is engaging with our supply chain, and making everything work in a much more efficient way. So slowly over time, what we're going to do, well, by 2020, what we're going to do is perform a lot of gymnastics. We're going to have a little rainbow government slice here. Everything's going to be multicolored, but it's going to be clear, it's going to be concise. And we're going to be able to see how we progress to 2020 to deliver more and more projects. So at the moment, we are seeing a gain from this process. Last year, the year before last, we achieved full level BIM level 2 accreditation from the BSI. We're one of the first 4 countries in the world to achieve this. So our BIM level 2 processes are all accredited to the BSI. We've won numerous awards in construction for BIM, and the picture you can see there of the nice big silver Cheerio is the Museum of the Future, which we support from Ireland from a BIM point of view. So all of these processes are coming from BIM, and they're driving us towards a much more efficient and a much more process-driven environment. So where are we now, and what's happening with our whiteboards now? Well, currently we've started off on a project in Dublin. It's quite a large healthcare project, very high profile. It's well known to many people out there. It has about 6,500 rooms in it. The program itself has about 20,000 line items. And we're currently at phase A, enabling works. So we are digging the hole in the ground, which is quite large. We have over 2,000 piles to put in, and we have a minimal presence on the ground, as it were, because we're only at enabling work stage. And at the moment, up until Christmas and at the moment, we are working on a traditional whiteboard structure. But the whiteboard structure has a few limitations, and the system that we have, the people that we have on site, we have limitations with those as well. And those limitations are primarily based around the culture that we own. So as we look at this whiteboard here from last month, as early as last month, 2 months ago, this whiteboard system didn't have as much information. It didn't have an owner for the information. It didn't have an owner for the task. It didn't have a closing out date for the task. It didn't have a clear decision on what was happening and showing people what we're going to do. So what had happened was we had taken a crew from a different project who had worked incredibly well together, a very, very strong crew. And they had a very strong tribal knowledge of working together, and they had a very strong knowledge, understanding the roles that each person played within the task. And between themselves, they decided as to how they were going to build their whiteboard system. They decided how they were going to transfer information between each other, and they decided on the best format to do it. And what started off as a 15-minute meeting where they would go through the different zones. They would talk about safety, what was happening in safety. They would talk about what was happening in zone 1. They would talk about zone 2 and so on in different areas. They would track performance, what had been done the previous day. What had happened with the whiteboard meeting was that it had changed from a planning tool or a logistic planning tool into a workshop, an environment where the people that were attending there used that time to talk to each other, to explain what they were doing that day, what they thought they were going to do that day, what they hadn't finished from the day before. So it became a workshop for them as a team to communicate to each other and to spread the roles around each other and to share the work and to make sure things got done. But there was no ownership. About a month ago, as part of a cultural change, we introduced roles and responsibilities. So where there was no name against the item, we added names. Where there was no closing date, we added a closing date. So while these are very, very small things from a day-to-day basis, from a cultural point of view, they offered a massive change in mindset for the people that were there. So while our programming department and our planning department would come down and they'd issue out on a weekly basis the program that had to be attended, there was a very large disconnect between the guys on site with their tribal knowledge and getting things done, and the planning department and trying to assure that things were done on time and recording of that information. So this whole process here is very much what we are doing. And I think this is happening across a lot of sites across the country. I think it's very normal to see a whiteboard like this. I think it's very normal that we would have a situation where the programmer comes down and instead of being able to go down and look at a screen and see what's happening and see what the feedback is and what's happening on his site, he attends the whiteboard meeting and the relevant foreman or the relevant site agent will call out the production figures for the previous day, which are then tracked, which are then fed back into the look-ahead meeting, and then they're fed back into a 6-week look-ahead. So this is a very, very normal process, but unfortunately for the size of the project that we have, so if I just flick back, well, I don't have to flick back screen, for the size of the project that we have, it's not a scalable task. So the obvious solution for us is to move forward with this. And before Christmas, due to the size of the location, we're moving forward. So our whiteboard meeting, same slide as before, is going to be transformed. We are no longer going to use this process in this format. We will still have a whiteboard meeting, but it'll no longer be a project day-to-day workshop where the people on site can look at it and say, this is where we're going to go. This is what we want to do. It's going to change, and it's already started to change, and it starts to look a little bit more like this. So I'm sure a lot of people here in the audience will recognize this. Maybe not the people, but certainly the picture in the background, which is the lovely confetti, a lovely rainbow of post-it notes across the screen. And this team session was part of our introduction of the last planner into the system. And it's an indication of the massive cultural change that we have to implement on site. We have a rainbow of people on site, all levels of skill. We have people on site who can operate the best technology. They can pick up any piece of equipment, be it an iPad for site data collection, or the latest phone, or the latest application and open it up and work away. And on the same site, in the same room, we have people that will use a phone call only to take telephone calls. They have no concept of technology. They have no concept of email. They don't want email. They don't want technology. So as part of this project, to ensure that we have delivery of this project, because it is absolutely massive, and to ensure that we have a scalable system to ensure that once we have multiple whiteboards and once tribal knowledge starts to fail us in a massive way, we are implementing a system now of Last Planner on the site. And Last Planner is going to make quite a few changes for us. We know it can be done. We've taken in external consultants to assist with this, and we're looking at the software technology that will help us go through this and build everything up in a manner that is constructible, scalable, and will continue see us through to the end of the project, hopefully, well, definitely on time and definitely on budget. We know it can be done because at the moment our other partners in the other parts of the group in BAM, so for example, BAM Nuttall, are massive users of the Last Planner system. They use this quite extensively, and that's been a part of their journey for quite a while. But for BAM Ireland, our system and our culture is changing. We've taken a different journey, and Last Planner has now come up on us, on our radar, as the next step for us to continue on. So as usual with the Last Planner system, we've gone out and we have said, right, we set up our post-its, we've set up all our tasks, we've set up all the subtasks, we built it all out, and then we've left a poor unfortunate sitting in a dark room with a large roll of paper figuring it all out. But this has led even in the last week, this has led to massive jumps for us in what we want to do and where we want to go with the system. We have gone from a 6-week look ahead with a weekly baselining that is, to say the least, loose. We're going to move to a 3-week look ahead. It's going to be much more granular, and it's going to be backed up and baselined by weekly meetings. On top of all that, we're going to retrain all of our site staff that attend these meetings, along with the subcontractors as we scale up to a larger size, to make sure that the daily whiteboard meeting moves away from a workshop environment. It's no longer a place to come in and whine and moan and worry about the different things of the day. It's where we come in and we look at the size of the project that we have. It's also to make sure that the whiteboard meetings become about logistics. We are building a 6,500 room hospital in a very small, nearly city centre site. We have limited access. We have 9 cranes on site, and we have several delivery and drop-off points that need logistical planning. That is absolutely a requirement. As we move, at the moment in phase A works, we're moving out about 100 trucks a day of earthworks across the site, both in and out of the site, through the city and off the different drop points. But as we continue now, we have all the piling going in. Phase A and phase B are going to overlap. We're going to have tower cranes going up. We're going to have concrete trucks coming in as well as excavation trucks. And our whiteboard meeting culture is going to have to change very, very strong. Sorry, it's going to have to change rapidly and in a very, very strong direction towards a much more managed and a much more structured environment. So poor Brian that's sitting there now at the moment is currently redesigning our system, our culture. And as the planner on the job, he's taken his 20,000 items, reduced it down, and now our whiteboard meeting is going to be much more scalable as such, because we're going to build a culture now from the ground up to change that. And as with our BIM process, we're going to implement a lot more technology. So as part of our greater scaling system and our BIM process, we have access to software from the likes of Autodesk at an enterprise level. And that gives us access to a program for them called BIM 360 Plan. Now, BIM 360 Plan is a very simple interface. It's not a last planning tool in the sense that we don't sit down within it and work out what happens each day and what's going to happen on a day-to-day basis. But what it does do is that it's a last planner data capture tool. So when Brian is sitting down and figuring out his 3-week look ahead, Brian is able to load into this system his 3-week, his 6-week, whatever it is, data into this. When he sits down with the site agents and they plan their weekly look ahead, he can sit down at this system, put in each company, put in the tasks that they've got to do. If it's a large task, break it down into smaller units, maybe day chunks or single day chunks. And then at the daily whiteboard meeting, he can pull this system up on the whiteboard, or sorry, on the screen. So our whiteboard meeting for logistics and our whiteboard meeting for deciding on what has to happen on that day now changes from a workshop discussing how things are going to happen into a workshop as to what we are planning to do that day. And at every stage of this toolbox talk or the whiteboard meeting, when they're using this system, they can zone into each area. They can see who's working on what area. They can see what the overlap is. They can plan if logistically there's going to be a clash between different tasks. We can pull out the PPC numbers. We can do reports on it. So now our whiteboard meeting is going to transform from a workshop where the tribal guys on site discuss what has to happen on a day-to-day basis and who's going to move that truck from here to there and is it in the way and so on. It's going to move to a more logistical system, logistic-based system, to enable us to micromanage and micro-plan on the site a much, much more efficient system and a much easier system to get around. And the beauty of this system, I haven't got much more to go now. The beauty of this system is that not only is it going to be based on the site, in the office where the site cabins are, where they have the whiteboard meetings, not only is it going to be used by the site agents and the planning team to drill down through the tasks to create smaller, more manageable tasks, we're also going to bring that out, the system out onto site with us. So when we go out onto site, we bring it out on an iPad or a similar device. We will walk around the site. We'll be able to go to different locations, observe what's happening. We are able to go in and say, right, company A has committed to completing this task. It's a 3-day task. They've completed 5 days. They've committed 5 days to do it. As we're walking around the site, or as the site agents are walking around checking that this work is done, they can walk up to the area, the different zones. They can talk to the people on site. They can see how they're doing. And most importantly, they can update the system to show if there are any roadblocks. They can update the system to say this task has been delayed. So they don't have to wait until the whiteboard meeting the next day to update the system. What they're able to do is they're able to go to each individual task team, identify the task, identify the roadblocks, update the system to say that this has been delayed for whatever reason. A concrete truck may be delayed, it might have fallen over, it might have done whatever it is. Update the system, go back to the office or on this within the site itself, sync the system to the master plan or back to the main system, and that will update all of the metrics that are live in that site. So while they're out on site, they're updating the planning process as they go. This could be driven by a site foreman, a site agent, a site team leader, the planner, anybody at all. But when they go to their whiteboard meeting the next day, they understand where they are, where they were supposed to be, what the delays are, and if there had been any roadblocks from the previous day, they're able to see the impact of those roadblocks at the whiteboard meeting for what's going on. This is not a planning system in the sense that it will not feed back into the likes of Primavera yet. But what it does do is it gives the site team on the ground a very, very clear indication of their PPC, of their project percentage complete. It gives them a very indication of where the roadblocks are. It allows the planners to look and download all the information on roadblocks and see where the systems are going wrong. So if we have delivery of concrete to a particular part of the site and that's failing or being constantly delayed, at the next weekly look ahead, they can discuss that and move forward with the system. So we are taking the last planner system, the whiteboard, and we're pushing it out onto site in a manner that we can address it. Now, this system is a massive cultural change for all of us. We've tried this a few times in Ireland and it's failed. We've tried it twice in Ireland and it's failed. And it failed because of the cultural system on site. We had sites where we have very strong tribal teams that have a very strong, well-knit team that is very good at understanding what the other person does. And when we try and introduce this system with very limited last planner knowledge, the system falls over, simply because the tribal knowledge eats the process. On the National Children's Hospital, where we're working now, we have an opportunity, and we are taking this opportunity to move from our old traditional whiteboard system of planning the events to a much more collaborative, a much more logical, and a much more information-rich system that will provide metrics on what we're doing. So while the whiteboard is still a relevant tool, and it's important for sharing the information around the site, this system here will allow the site teams, no matter how many of them we have, to focus on their area, or the companies in their area, or their own company, or the subcontractor company, or whatever management they need to do across our entire site to ensure that they're able to go out and deliver the project on time, and to make sure that any roadblocks that they come across are noted, and also to track the root cause so that we can develop a lessons learned for projects going forward. And I think that's pretty much everything I have to say. I know I'm a few minutes short here, but I think I'm good to go.
That's great, Simon. Thank you. That is very insightful. I enjoyed hearing all about that. So if anyone has questions that they'd like to ask Simon, please feel free to put them in on the question tool that's available on your webinar controls. I have a couple to start you off. And I don't know, I can try and make you laugh here, Simon, but does the quality of the post-it notes matter? So if you're in that interim stage going from the whiteboard to the post-it notes before going fully electronic because you're bringing your project team on the journey, do you have to buy good quality post-it notes to make sure they don't fall off the wall?
Funnily, the answer is yes. If you buy cheap it's crazy because what you end up doing is getting blue tack and sticking them to the wall.
Or sellotape or
because
something, yeah.
yeah, because what happens is at the end of the session, you roll it up, you go down the office, you leave it there for a couple of days, you go back again, you roll it out on the table like Brian had there, and it's just a mishmash of post-it notes. And it sounds ridiculous, but it is a funnily important stage.
It's good. And what do you do? Say you have a team and you just have a couple of people that aren't buying into to this shift in process that you're trying to make, whether it's just moving up a step or going fully digital. How do you try and bring, what do you do if it's just a couple of people that aren't going to participate?
Everybody's different, Ellie. Everybody has a hook or a point of feature that's important to them. So as an example, while we're rolling out a construction site management system onto a building site where we're introducing digital asset capture or online checklists or some form of digital system, we will always get people who are resistant to this technology. They've never used it before, they can't use it, I'll never learn how to use that. And the key to implementing it with these people is to find the one thing that's of interest to them. So on one of our particular sites, we have a site, I think it's 47 kilometers long, and we were getting very, very poor buy-in. But I have one user who stands basically at a checkpoint all day, and he's completed over 1,000 checklists. And when we brought this to the attention of the site, we were able to say, look, this one guy is a massive user. And they say, yeah, but he just fills out traffic sheets. And as we went through the process with the site team, one of the big catches or the hooks for the site team was the ability to capture hours worked on the site during that day. So the labor returns. And once you have that hook for that person, once they can see the advantage for them, they don't have to learn the whole system. They only have to learn where they step into the process, what they have to get from it, and where they step out of the process. And the more simple is probably the wrong word, the more intuitive you can make that for people, the easier it is to onboard people. Because one of the biggest problems we have within the construction industry and within any manual work-based industry is the onboarding of people who are manually orientated rather than technology orientated. It's not they can't do it. They all have Xboxes at home. They all use the internet. It's understanding that they want to do it. So it's taken us 4 years to onboard people onto the SMS system that we use. I would say it'll probably take us a guts of 6 months to onboard this particular project. It'll probably take us another year and a half to onboard the rest of BAM Ireland to a stage where they are comfortable with the system, but where everyone that's using it is getting what they want from it.
Yeah, because there's always that bit where when people start to use it, they see their information going in, but it always takes a bit of a time for them to get the return that means something to them.
Correct. And part of the process that we are putting in place is that all of the workflows that we have, like we basically look at a project as a cradle to grave exercise. And at the end of the project doesn't die for us because we have a handover stage. We've got to hand over the data and so on. But for each of our users, they have to understand their role and responsibility. So from everyone from a site clerk all the way up to a site engineer to site management, they all have a little particular role to play. And as part of our transformation into a more digital company with better process and a more evolved and industrialized approach to construction, we have to teach each one of those roles their specific, what part they play in it, and also to understand, to communicate back with them what it is that they want from the system. Because no matter what it is, if someone is doing something on a building site, be it the project manager or the site engineer, if they're not achieving if they're not getting what they want from the system, they will not use it. If it comes across as too complicated, they will literally pick up a €1,000 piece of kit, leave it down in the mud and walk away. It doesn't help their job. So no matter what system they use, if it's better quality post-it notes, if it's an iPad, if it's a mobile phone, no matter what it is, as long as that system is intuitive for the user to use, you'll get much better buy-in.
It's very true. I have always said that about any of the processes I develop in my job role. If you make it simple, they will use it.
Yes.
And that's simply it. If you make anything difficult, people will then go so far out of their way to get around that. It's crazy. A couple of questions in from the audience. So we have one in from William Power. Do you think it's a good idea to rotate the host of the huddles across the team members, Or is it better that one person takes ownership and direction of this, for a period of time?
That will depend on the team. You will have within any balanced team, or with any team that is performing, you will have multiple people that can fulfill multiple roles. You won't have a very you'll have people with defined roles, but they'll be multi-skilled. If you have, you're probably always better to have a lead and a second, for the obvious reason that if one person goes sick, the other person can fill in. I think if one person drives it all the time, it becomes too personality orientated, and we lose part of the process. They start to take shortcuts. They start to assume that this is the way to do it. If you rotate it amongst a fixed number of people in the group, that tends not to happen, and the process is followed more evenly and more consistently. But I do think that if we have more than one person, in no matter what size the team, you always have fallback. Then it's always a better way to do it.
Yeah. I suppose with anything, you probably need to get like almost one good salesperson on each site when you're starting to move in there, to get them to amp it up when you're not there training them. And
yeah, you have to have it at every level. You have to have a champion. So we're very lucky on the National Children's Hospital at the moment. We are very lucky that we have a champion at the top, and at every single level, from document control to engineering to planning to progress, we have a champion. We have at least one person at every level that understands exactly what they need to do. And those are the people that drive it, and they communicate very clearly what their intent is. And that is a saving grace on any project. I think when you have a project that is being driven by one person and you don't have champions at various levels, it's very difficult. On a construction site, if you have a champion foreman, a person who's able to basically lead when no one else will lead, the amount of work that gets done on a building site with a good foreman is unreal. We have a project now where I have 7 foremen, and I'm blessed that within that I have the absolute rainbow of ability. So I have a guy at the top who is tech savvy, hungry to use it, can see the benefit, and literally picked it up on day one and said, I want this to do this, this, and this. And in the same room sitting beside him, I had a guy that says, I'll never use this. I don't even like writing stuff down. Yeah. But without those champions, you will never get the buy-in from the negative person, from the naysayer. The champion is the key person, because within their team, they are known within their team, they're trusted within their team, and they will lead from the front. And if they have a number 2, even better. And if they can build a 1, 2, 3, 4 within their team, everyone knows their place, everyone knows what's expected of them. So even when you have someone who's not interested, has lesser ability, or just couldn't be bothered, 2 things will happen there. They'll either isolate themselves and want to leave, or they'll buy into the team spirit and they will do whatever the rest of the team do, because they don't want to let the team down. And I was a very good win there after Christmas with the team of 7 foremen, 1 complete naysayer, 1 absolute champion, 4 or 5 people sitting on the fence, and the champion and the 4 or 5 people literally carried the naysayer over the line. And at the end of the session, the naysayer was putting forward ideas. So I think, regardless of the system, whether it's whiteboard, lean, quality control, health and safety, without site champions, you're goosed. It's a much better system to have people on site that are engaged and are bought into the process and want to achieve the same goal.
That's very true for anything you're doing. Another question from Owen O'Shea, and you probably won't be able to give an exact answer to this, but could you outline software licensing costs associated with the BIM 360 system? So say, for example, someone had one project and they were looking to roll it out. Any ideas?
Yes.
Yeah.
No. On a slightly, okay. So Autodesk have a suite of projects called BIM 360 Field, and that is made up of BIM 360 Plan, which is a planning type tool, Glue, which is a data, a model comparison tool or a model viewing tool, BIM 360 Field, which is a data capture tool for sites, and Docs, which is sort of like Dropbox or a very basic document management suite. Now, BAM globally have an enterprise agreement which costs an awful lot of money, and it's run off for over a couple of years, so we have enterprise access to all their suites. But on an other basis, if you wanted to use any of the BIM 360 projects or products, they are sold by AutoCAD on a project by project basis typically, and the price of the product is dependent on the value of the project.
Okay, that's a very clever way to do it. So, even if you have a smaller project, it's a great opportunity to get in there and learn all of the system and try out different modules and stuff before you maybe try and bring it out on a larger project.
one of the because we're an enterprise agreement, one of the things within our enterprise agreement is that whoever is working on one of our sites, be it on the design team or as a subcontractor or as an inspector or as the client, or even like we have building sites where the scaffolder is on BIM 360 field. So if you're working on a BAM project, you will have access to, and it's a BIM project, you will have access to the BIM 360 projects relevant to your role on that project. So
Perfect.
on the likes of the hospital, on the likes of the courts, anybody that's involved in construction process that requires it will have access to these products.
That actually kind of ties into a question I had written down myself there. So when you were talking about on the BIM 360, when someone's down the field, they can update anything about their system or their area and then bring it back and dock it. Now, do you limit the access to the system so that people can only change things in their own areas of responsibility?
Yes. So depending on, it's all role driven. So if we have, for the likes of plan or something like that, we can limit themselves to their own company, their own companies. They can only author or they can only edit their own equipment. In the likes of BIM 360 field, as a contractor, we have access to everything. But the architect, for example, will only have access to the issues that they raise or the checklist that they complete, or the equipment such as the model or whatever, or the library that they need to see. So when they go out with their iPad, they sync it up. The system only syncs the information that's visible to them or that's required for them. So we use both permissions and filters to ensure that the right person gets the right information. And that's across the BIM 360 field suite.
Okay. Question in from someone I think Simon Watson of Jones Engineering.
Yeah.
One of the big pluses from the last planner system, the way we've implemented it here and Jones have, is the visual aspect of having all the post-it notes on the wall. It's a lot easier for people to grasp the scale of things and what they're looking at.
Yeah.
Do you think that a digital system that's being viewed kind of on individual tablets will have the same effect, or do you get the same kind of thing because you're bringing them in and doing
well, you see,
the
there are two different processes. So the post-it process is a live environment where you are literally brainstorming each individual task and breaking them down to get the sequencing right and to get the constructability right and to ensure that everything that you're doing works with a flow. The little digital system that we're using here, BIM 360 Plan, is the very final stage of that. So your post-its will be done, you'll have argued over it, you'll have figured out what it is. So at the weekly look-ahead meeting, the planning team and the site agents will sit down effectively with the list of post-it notes, for want of a better example, and their line items. And in Plan, they will break those line items down into small manageable chunks. So they will say, for example, a task may be install, or I don't know, it might be pour 300 square meters of concrete. Now, just as an example, you wouldn't pour 300 square meters of concrete in a day, but you might you wouldn't have that as one task over maybe 5 days. You'd break that down into day 1, pour zone 1, day 2, pour zone 3, and you break it down into individual tasks. And that's what BIM 360 Plan shows. It's taking the last planner of your post-it system and turning it into a granular system where you're giving responsibility for the breakdown of the micro tasks within the tasks. And that's a fixed process. So once you've decided that, that's what goes into Plan. Out in the field, you don't use the post-its. They're not. It's that's the next stage on from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense. That's all the questions that we've got in from the listeners at the moment. Hopefully your answers there to William, Owen and Simon have clarified those things for them. If you have anything more to ask or you need more clarification, I have a question of my own, and I'm controversial as always, Simon, as you know. But I have heard, I have heard out in the industry of people talking about doing partial BIM on a project. Do you want to talk to that? Is it possible to do partial BIM, or is it not worth it at all?
Of course it's possible. BIM is not a thing. BIM is a process. So if you look at the BIM is a process by which you achieve the most efficient construction and operation of a fixed asset or a finished asset, and you manage the information that's included in that. So if I was a quantity surveyor down in Tralee, for example, and I want to work on a BIM project, I don't have to understand the entire BIM process. I only have to understand what my requirement within the BIM process is, and I am then working in BIM. You know, you can implement it. Like if you were to turn around to me and say that, right, we are going to write down a list, like a last planner, for example, of how we're going to build something. Running the last planner on its own is effectively a very basic BIM process, because you're going to identify who's doing what when, who has to be told about it, what changes are going to be made, who's notified about it, where we're going to save the data. You know, last planner, BIM is nothing more than a tool for a very good planning or a very good process system. The fact that it has a 3D model in the back of it only means that the information is stored in a common data environment and is more visually acceptable. But there's no reason why a BIM has to have a model in it as such. It can be building information management as much as it can be building information modeling.
Very true. It's very true. That's all the questions we have there. You have any final thoughts, wrap-ups, advice for
Absolutely
our
not.
audience? Oh,
No.
come on. I'm sure you can make something up on the spot, Simon.
I spent the last 40 minutes making stuff up. Do I have to do more?
What's the biggest value of bringing in BIM and Last Planner to a project team, be that to the owner perhaps or to the major contractor on it?
Certainty. The answer to that is simple. It's certainty. So it means that a owner is going to receive what they expect when they expect it, and that for the OPEX of their asset, that they have fewer problems. For the construction team, part of our biggest problem within construction with traditional contracts is that design is a movable feast. And as people, traditionally what happens is a client will say, I want a building that does this. And the designer will come and go, oh, here's a building that does this. And then they'll get a contractor and the contractor will start building. And the contractor is building ahead of design. So the contractor is proceeding at risk. What BIM and Lean and all of these processes do, or will do in the future, will mean that design will be complete because the architect or the design team will understand the client's requirement before they build it. Using a Lean process or last planner system, we can go through how we're going to schedule that construction. And then for a contractor, the risk involved in taking out a project is greatly mitigated because we're no longer proceeding at risk. What we're doing is we're effectively taking a proven model. And the only thing then that's going to impede us are the unknowns, such as weather or traffic accidents or whatever it may be. But effectively, we're taking Lego and building whatever it may be. Everything should fit together nicely. So really what we're doing is we're removing the risk in the construction process to ensure that the owner, stroke client, is receiving the product or asset in the format that they want to enable them to run it over a longer period of time.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, I'm in document control, and a huge part of my job is spending time digging up documents from 15 years ago. Yeah. And I'm kind of lucky that I have a bit of a database memory and I can remember where things go. But
yes, but if you're not there, Ellie,
trying to find but that's all part of it. You can't have a single point of view. You need to have something where the systems work, that people can use the systems independently of having the experts around.
Yeah, so a good example of that would be with the fire there recently in London in the tower block. It took them approximately, I think it was 6 weeks to identify all the other buildings that had the same defect. If there had been a smart city environment, well, in the future there may be, and all of those buildings had been included in a smart city in a BIM and construction way, they could have just run a query across the database and identified every single one of those buildings in minutes. And that's where the construction industry is going. That's where the ownership is going, is to create a more integrated digital environment to ensure that we can access the information that is built into our buildings but stored in a box somewhere more efficiently. Got
another question in there that's quite interesting. How Have you come across anyone using whiteboards for office work versus field work? So like your project team or your finance team doing stuff like the post-it notes on the whiteboards or that?
We do that within the virtual design and construction team here in BAM. We would use that process. So every time a new product comes out or we're looking to develop a new process, we use the post-it system, because it allows us to break it down from a very complex task into a step-by-step stage task, and to identify potential roadblocks or handoffs or stage gates that enable us to process information more efficiently. And it's fundamentally the basis of what we do for our BIM Level 2 process.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you can apply it to anything really that you want to.
It's just a process. So while we don't call it Last Planner, it's the process we follow through in development of our BIM Level 2 process for the BSI accreditation.
Yeah.
It's very powerful. And we're using similar processes now to develop the workflows for developing each individual role on a building site, so that we can identify all the checklists they have to fill in, what training they require, everything. And it's not that we're using a Last Planner system, but we're using lean principles to reduce the amount of work we've got to do to ensure that each person can achieve and walks away from the site less stressed.
Yeah.
You know,
that's
the big gain.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have decent technology support behind you, someone who can fix printers or make your phone work or anything like that, whatever it is, you just get frustrated and the project starts to fall apart because of people's frustration in dealing with minor things rather than the major project stuff.
Exactly. A big difficulty we have in the construction industry is ownership, and the gray area between who owns what and who's responsible for what. We have people out there who are filling in checklists and or signing off documents and or doing loads of stuff that they shouldn't be responsible, and all of a sudden they are responsible for. And the industrialization or the BIMification, if you want, that's been mandated, will reduce that stress for people on site and improve their productivity and improve the quality of their work. Like overall, if you have a person that's focused on doing their job well as part of the jigsaw and is happy doing it, you will have a much happier building and you'll be more likely to achieve on date, because people are more willing to work around the problems then and to achieve.
It's very true. Another question in from one of the attendees: do you think lean construction is also a process and can be partially implemented? So I think when we talked about BIM earlier, we pretty much really meant lean construction overall, didn't we? I mean, these terms are in some ways interchangeable, but what we're talking about is the system of planning and managing the work out.
To be honest with you, Ellie, BIM is a manifestation of lean for construction.
Yeah.
That's all that it is. It's, if you look at a very good BIM process and you put beside it a very good lean process, they're the same.
Yeah, and I know I've certainly taken lean techniques and used them when we've been working on some stuff in dot control, and used them to look at our old processes with new eyes and refresh. I think it could be you can do bits of it wherever you need to, but the key thing is following the core principles really.
Yeah, and once you have it up and running, the ideal behind it is to polish it. What you're looking for then, like once you have it up and running, you're either looking for massive gains, i.e. you find a new product that you've got to implement in your system, or you're looking for small gains. A site engineer comes back to you and says, you know, if I use this checklist and we just merge those 2 questions together, instead of filling in 25 questions, I'm filling in 23 questions. And it sounds like a tiny gain, but you're getting buy-in from the user. And you're getting
they're seeing you making improvements to the system based on what they've said, and that's a massive thing. It's not here is a system and you will use it, is here is a system that you can use to benefit yourself and you can tweak it as needed.
Correct. Like by implementing technology, we are looking at surveying technology, and we're looking at the BIM 360 products and so on, and we reckon between the two of them we can save up to an hour a day for a site engineer in paperwork alone.
That's amazing.
Between transferring that, well, you know, we have, I don't know how many thousand people we have in Ireland at the moment, but if we had 100 site engineers and we could save 1 hour a day, that's a huge gain.
2.5 people a week every week. Yeah.
That's a
last question then we have in interesting one from John French. Have you seen much of a transition, or have you seen how much adoption of the Last Planner system have you seen in Ireland in the last 5 years, and why Why is that transition happening?
I have seen quite a bit of it, but it's mostly within the likes of the larger companies. So the likes of DPS, the likes of the Mercurys, the Joneses, the Jacobs, and so on. It's being driven, obviously enough, from the likes of Intel. I think the whole BIM for construction, the whole BIM idea has been championed by ourselves and by CISC and some of the other big players. The names escape me now. Some of the other big construction, but Clancy's and so on, across the country. I think the lads down in WIT are driving it more and more, and I think people are becoming less afraid of the idea of process. Within construction, people's eyes glaze over when you say BIM, but if you say lean process or you say I can save you this, they're interested. I think that once Ireland is mandated for BIM, which has started, we will see this becoming day-to-day across the construction industry. As the roles settle down within the process that's been attributed to them and they understand what's expected of them, I think we'll see it become very mainstream, but it might take 2 or 3 years to do it.
I definitely think it's going to be a few years till we get up to those levels of adoption. But even just to give a small example from internally here in Intel, with our tool design reviews, which we're working with our tool owners from the factory, so they understand their areas in the factory. They're reasonably good at converting it from drawings. But we've now started giving them 3D headsets where they can actually go into the model and do the walk around, and they are completing their design reviews in 1/3 of the time it used to take them. So that's going to be a massive saving on a time crunch project that we're going through.
Yeah. So there is a cost involved in all of this technology, but for someone of our size, that's offset against risk. And we're really about risk mitigation. And if we can minimize the risk and maximize our output and achieve on schedule, that's where we make money. And that's what it's all about at the end of the day.
That's it, yeah. Simon, that's been wonderful. Thank you so much for your insightful presentation and your responses to all the questions that we had. We will be sending out a copy of this webinar to everyone that attended in a few days' time. And the next webinar is taking place on the 23rd of February. We'll be sending out the information on that shortly via LinkedIn and our MailChimp, our distribution lists. Again, thank you to Box Media, our media and communications partner, for facilitating this webinar. And thank you again to Simon and BAM Construction for coming in and talking to us. You can follow Lean Construction Ireland on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and our website for our latest news. So thank you to everyone. Have a safe rest of day and please be lean. Thanks all. Goodbye.
Hello. Hold on.